Good afternoon and welcome to our council meeting for December 14th, 2021, 4:30 p.m. Before we get started, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional territories and the oral practices of the Blackfoot Nation, which include the Siksika, the Kainai, and the Piikani. We also acknowledge that the Tsuut'ina, the Stoney Nakoda First Nations, the Métis Nation Region 3, and all people who make their homes in the Treaty 7 region of southern Alberta. We're making this acknowledgement to demonstrate our continuing efforts to work together as we strive for reconciliation through increased and collective learning. Okay, we have the agenda in front of us, and we'll start off with Madeline. And Madeline, are you on there? You got 15 minutes. No, just joking.
Giving me a heart attack to start off there. It's like, okay.
Okay, it's your show.
Thank you. So thanks for the opportunity to speak about the proposed signs amendment. Can everyone hear me okay, just to start off? Yeah. So just to introduce myself to the new councillors, my name is Madeline Baldwin. I work for the Oldman River Regional Services Commission, and we provide planning advice and services to a number of municipalities in southern Alberta. So as you would have seen in your agenda package, it's a fairly lengthy report, so I'll do my best to walk us through it as straightforwardly as possible. There's 5 topics, and so I'll give some opportunity for discussion and questions after each topic so that we don't, you're not just listening to me talk forever. So hopefully that structure works well for our conversation today. So as an introduction, I want to highlight that signs sometimes are overlooked, but they're an important component of the urban environment, and they do affect the look and feel of Brooks. Of course, the safety of pedestrians and cyclists and vehicles, and the success of businesses and wayfinding within the city. So the current sign regulations in the City of Brooks Land Use Bylaw do need to be updated to be a bit more rational, consistent, and easy to understand. So staff have identified some issues they have with the current regulations, and they're looking for ways to provide more clarity and streamline the development permit process for signs. So that's what this report and the proposed amendments are all about. So attachment 1 in your package is a working copy of the proposed changes to the existing sign regulations. So aside from these larger topic areas that I'm going to discuss today with you, that attachment shows all of the wording and formatting changes that would then show up in a bylaw if this was to move forward. And a lot of that is just to improve readability and implementation of the sign regulations moving forward. So as I stated, it's split into 5 topics. So we're going to start with sign types in land use districts. So I'll just explain a bit about that and then give you a chance to ask any questions or provide some comments and feedback. So it's currently unclear the way it's written right now in the land use bylaw, which types of signs are allowed in which land use districts. So for example, we have freestanding signs. They might make sense in a commercial district, but based on their size, they may not be appropriate in a residential neighborhood, for instance, but we don't have a clear direction on which land use districts we want to allow those in. So what we're proposing to add is a table that would outline the type of sign and then whether it's permitted or discretionary or prohibited in each land use district. So how we've approached this is by grouping land use districts together based on similar uses allowed and similar expected impacts of signs on existing development. So we have a group of land use districts that are predominantly residential. So that includes residential single detached, residential small lot, residential low density, residential manufactured home, and manufactured home park, and then the future urban development. So all of those land use districts, the uses listed in them are predominantly residential. Then we have a category that is a mix of residential and small scale commercial uses. So in here we put our residential high density zone because that allows apartment buildings and is still fairly residential, but it also allows some mixed use and some commercial that way. And then our commercial neighborhood land use district, which is also a mix of residential and smaller scale commercial. Then we've highlighted the pedestrian oriented commercial through the commercial central as its own category. And then we've grouped our larger commercial and industrial land use districts together. So this includes commercial general, industrial light, industrial general, and industrial heavy, considering they would have a similar need for types of signs. And then lastly, public and park uses, we grouped those 2 land use districts together the public and quasi-public service, which is more of your fire halls and public buildings, things like that. And then the public recreation and open space, which is more of our park spaces, and you can also have schools and things like that in those districts. So the table on page, starts on page 2 and goes on to page 3 of that memo. Then on the left-hand side of the table, it lists the different types of signs. And then across the top, you'll see those categories of land use districts that I just identified. And then the table is showing a P, which means that the sign type would be a permitted use within that land use district. So that means that if they're complying with the land use bylaw regulations and they come in for a sign permit, that's permitted, and the development officer can issue a permit for that. If it has a D, that means discretionary. So that means that it would be a permit that would have to be referred to the Municipal Planning Commission for the decision. And then if the cell is blank, then we're saying that that is a sign that would not be allowed within that land use district. And that means that it can't even be allowed through a waiver or variance, since you can't provide a variance for uses that aren't listed in the land use district. So you'll see that there, that within residential, predominantly residential, basically what we're just allowing is a window sign for home occupation, related to home occupation permits. So that's consistent with what we kind of have now. So then when we get to our residential and commercial mixed, then we're allowing a bit more signs. So canopy, fascia, freestanding, projecting, shingle, and window, but not any signs with electronic display. And as we'll get to in later discussion points, there would be more restriction on the size in these signs of signs in this area, just with the recognition that you could be adjacent to residential. And then as we kind of move into the CC, the commercial central, which is kind of your downtown main area, there's more sign types allowed, including some electronic display. And then as you move into larger style commercial or industrial, then there's really pretty much every sign type is permitted. And then for public and the PPS and POS land use districts, similar to what we see in the mix of commercial and residential under RHD and CN, but we are suggesting that freestanding signs with electronic display and fascia signs with electronic display are allowed as a discretionary use. So those would be decided on by the Municipal Planning Commission based on the context. But that's in recognition that we do have schools and kind of public facilities like that do like to use electronic signs so that they don't have to have volunteers going out to change the messages, and so that they can advertise events and things going on in that regard. So the content that would be on those signs would be restricted to stuff for community or nonprofit or those kind of categories of content. So that table shows what we're kind of suggesting as far as the sign types in each land use district. So our recommendation is to accept that categorization as we lined out, or to provide us any direction of any changes needed. So I just want to pause there, ask if there's questions about that or feedback that you want to provide at this point about how we've categorized those sign types.
Any questions? No, it doesn't look like it.
Okay, well, I can keep going.
Yeah,
we'll also have a chance at the end to just kind of go through those recommendations again and make sure that they're in line with what council would like to see. So next up, we're going to move into electronic display regulations. So this can get a little complicated. So the demand for signs with electronic display, you sometimes also see them called digital signs, is becoming more prevalent in cities. And so a lot of places are kind of trying to catch up with their regulations to what the demand and technology is, where that is at. So the main advantage of this type of sign for advertisers, obviously, is that they can have sign copy change regularly, so they can show multiple ads on one sign structure. So obviously that's desirable for advertisers. So the current regulations do create some confusion about which types of sign can have electronic display. So this is why we've really tried to separate out the definition for electronic display. So instead of saying you get an electronic sign, what you get is either a fascia sign with electronic display or a freestanding sign with electronic display, and just make that more clear. So I have a number of questions here that we need to answer in order to move forward with kind of drafting these regulations. So first of all is similar to what I just talked about, deciding what types of signs should be allowed to include electronic display. So nowadays you can have electronic display on basically any kind of sign type. So the current regulations in the land use bylaw state that electronic signs shall only be permitted as freestanding, fascia, and projecting signage. So once again, that makes it unclear under which land use districts that's appropriate or not. So we've suggested, as we saw in that first table, that grouping of higher intensity commercial and industrial would allow electronic display on fascia signs, which are signs that are on the face of the building. Would also allow it on freestanding signs, and that you could also have projecting signs, which are signs that are attached to the building but stick out, and window signs, so that it would be allowed in the commercial general and the industrial zones. Then it's also suggested that fascia with electronic display and freestanding with electronic display be discretionary in those public zones, as I noted ahead before, and that would be just for community or nonprofit or those types of content. And then that fascia signs with electronic display and freestanding signs with electronic display would be allowed in the commercial central. But we wouldn't be suggesting that any electronic display be allowed in the residential high density or the commercial neighborhood district, just in recognition that they can have impacts on residents if they have a sign kind of shining into their window. That's typically where the city would see the most complaints about an electronic sign, is in that scenario. So that's the first kind of question to answer there, to see if what we've laid out here makes sense, or if you have questions or changes you want to see. Another question we have is about animation or video effects. So the old terminology talked about it as animation often, but what we're basically saying is now electronic signs are basically like a TV screen, and you can display a full moving ad on them. So we want to understand if council wants to allow this type of sign within Brooks and what capacity. So it is recommended that if animation or those video type of ads are allowed, that it would just be restricted to those industrial or the commercial general land use district, and that we would keep regulations about restricting that a certain distance from intersections, just to avoid distraction or things like that. So that's another question to answer. And then as far as where they can be located, right now we have regulations that require signs with electronic display be separated a certain distance from each other depending on their size. So if they're smaller, between 1 meter squared and 2.5 meters squared, but still fairly large, so 10 to 27 square feet, then they need to be 30 meters apart. And if they're over that, so 2.5 meters squared to 15 meters squared, so this would be up to 115 feet, they should have a minimum spacing of 60 meters apart. So the rationale for these regulations, which are already in the land use bylaw, is to have separation between electronic signs on the same street, so that you don't have visual clutter or too much distraction from pedestrians or vehicles. So we just wanted to highlight these regulations, make sure this is still something that council wants to have as a restriction on electronic signs. And it just wanted to note that what that means is that that depending on the timing of when people apply for signs, it ends up creating a little bit of a first come, first served situation for electronic display. So the first business on a block, depending on the block length, may be the only one that is allowed to have electronic display because of that separation distance. We also have required separation distances from intersections and from residential development already in the land use bylaw. So that's a minimum distance of 15 meters from a signalized intersection, 50 feet, and then not to be located within 15 meters, 50 feet of a residential land use district. And that is, the exception to that is an electronic display sign for schools, for school purposes. So the rationale again for these regulations is that as we get closer to the intersection and people are stopped there and you have that electronic sign, it can be distracting for drivers and they may kind of miss their driving cues if they're distracted near an intersection. And then of course that if electronic signs are too close to people's homes, then will have a detrimental effect on their quality of life. And that's also where we hear more complaints about electronic signs if they come up. So we wanted to highlight those just so you're aware of those regulations, and we would recommend keeping them for electronic signs, but we're open to discussing any changes that council deems appropriate there. So the last thing I want to note about electronic signs that is just kind of catching up to the way that they're regulated in other land use bylaws. So as more communities have allowed this type of signage, there's been more robust regulations written about how to manage them. So they can be challenging to regulate because they are typically the type of sign that has the potential to have the largest negative impact on people. If you have sign brightness that's too high, or you have images that flash too quickly, it can cause safety concerns or be uncomfortable for people. So we also have the added challenge that electronic signs can malfunction in ways that a standard sign cannot. So you could have a sign suddenly start glitching out or just go black or white or something like that. So we do want to be able to have some regulations so that it's clear that the onus is on the owner of that sign or whoever has that permit to kind of manage that, and that we have a way to follow up with them if there's a problem with an electronic display sign. So those are the where these regulations come from. They sound a bit technical, but they are written following kind of best practice from other land use bylaws. So about electronic display remaining in place for a minimum of 10 seconds, or right now you have 8 seconds, kind of the standard that most places have moved to is 10 seconds. So that means an image can be up for 10 seconds and then it changes. So what you are avoiding is just like flashing ads that you can barely even absorb before it moves to the next one. And then that the transition effect is, not having a lot of fading in or out or dissolving or blinking or things like that. And of course, depending on how council wants to allow or not animation on electronic display signs, then that would change kind of how these regulations would be written as well. That the electronic display signs are fitted with an ambient light sensor. And so this is just to be able to set maximum light levels. And it sounds quite technical the way it's written in point 3, but it is kind of standard that the sign companies that do these kind of signs are used to working with these types of regulations. And there's light meters that you can kind of just do to get the reading. And that would basically just be if you get a complaint about the brightness of a sign, then you have a way to check whether they're staying within their maximum brightness or not and follow up with them that way to enforce. And then some regulations about that if an electronic display sign fails or malfunctions, that there has to be that they will turn it off within a certain time period and fix that and make sure it's operating again, and that we have current contact information for someone that has access to those technology controls so that we can deal with that so that it doesn't become a hazard or dangerous for drivers or anything like that. So those are just some recommended regulations to include with electronic display moving forward. So that was a lot of information to absorb about electronic display signs. Just want to pause there, ask for some feedback from council, if you have it at this point, or some questions related to electronic display.
Any questions?
There are a number of these types of signs in Brooks already, and this may be a question more for my compatriots, but if these are adopted and there's something, one of them is out of compliance, then what would happen?
Yeah, so I can.
Oh, no, for electronic signs?
Yeah, for an existing sign.
Yeah, okay, go ahead. Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt there. Yeah, so how that works is that some of these regulations are already in place, so they would have had to have been in line with these anyway. But basically, it would be similar to any kind of building or any other use that it was allowed under a previous land use bylaw. If the sign remains there unchanged and they're continuing to operate and they're not stopping using the sign or taking it down, then they can still operate within the parameters of their development permit that was approved under the previous land use bylaw regulations. If they are coming in to make a change to the sign, or they have stopped using that sign and then they want to bring it, do something new or take it down and put a new sign in, that's when we would ask them to come in for an updated development permit, and that would have to comply with the new regulations.
I was kind of curious, what are other communities doing with animation? With the signs?
Yeah, I would say that
you're almost recommending there be no animation, that it be kind of a still shot, and then it rolls into the next one. So.
Yeah, I think to be honest, like within the Old Man River Regional Services Commission, there's very few communities that even allow electronic display signs within their municipalities, and obviously a lot of those are towns and they're smaller and they, have a different approach than Brooks. My experience in Edmonton was that they did allow them in some limited cases. So I think it's really, I think if it is to be allowed, it should be limited in where it can occur. But it's kind of up to council to decide that, I think. I think my personal preference is that maybe to not do that, just because I personally find it a bit distracting. But yeah, those types of signs. But I understand that I live in Lethbridge and they have them here, and so I am used to seeing them. And it is also something that you can change in the future. But then, of course, if a sign is approved with that animation, then they could continue to operate that way. So. Sorry, I don't have a clearer direction for you.
Yeah. I think, I don't know, I'll ask the council, but I think we're probably in agreement that those, they have to be in commercial or residential, like not commercial or industrial. And I think there was something about being far enough away from residential, right? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We do have some by a couple of schools, I believe, though, that do have some level of animation.
Yeah, there is some with animation, like at the schools one, they'll animate, football game Friday night, 7 o'clock or something like that. But is that is that animation? Like they're more,
yeah,
it's more of a text, whatever, than scrolling. Yeah, it'd be more scrolling. Yeah.
Yeah, and this is kind of the challenge is I do think that that's a different impact when you have scrolling text versus, there's a sign near my house, and not near my house, but on my way home from work, that literally plays like a full TV ad, right? So I think that those are different degrees of impact. So I think if we wanted to differentiate that, we could find a way to kind of allow the scrolling text and disallow the other, but that would be, up to council. If we could try and write it so that there's a different kind of definition for one versus the other, and maybe one is allowed in more cases than the other.
But and going back to Ray's question there, I think these ones are grandfathered in now, right? So we wouldn't touch those. Okay, it'd be anything new. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, and those ones, they're in residential areas, but they don't face the residential areas. So I guess the question is whether we're concerned about an impact to adjacent residences or whether it's more distracting traffic in a school zone.
Okay. Go ahead there.
Yeah, so just to clarify, because the the one, or the transition between electronic display must not involve any visible effects, including, yeah, any action, motion, fading in or out, dissolving, blinking, intermittent or flashing lights, or the illusion of such effects. Like, that just sounds a little overly restrictive to me. I don't know about you guys. Like, because that would be like, so yeah, the one at the high school, right, where it fades, so I mean, like, that, so just to clarify, any new signs would not be allowed to have that effect, right? Is that what we're saying?
Yeah, so the wording of that is kind of to prevent, you know, like basically like blinking and flashing and things like that might happen when you move from one image, from one ad to the next ad on an electronic display sign. So as I noted, that would have to be updated we would change the wording of that if that's something that you want to allow.
Yeah, I don't really see that as I don't know, I personally, I don't know about you guys, I don't see that as a
problem.
No, I think it's, I don't know, I think it would be discouraging for, you know, businesses and whatever. You want to attract people, and we want to have a nice, modernized, you know, commercial district, and I don't know, I would think as a business owner that would be discouraging. I can understand like maybe full, like commercials. Even personally, I don't see the issue with that. I think we all drive. Like we drive down Calgary, Lethbridge, Medicine Hat. Nobody's crashing into each other because of signs that I don't know. Maybe we could see some. If this is a real issue, I'd like to see some data on it that kind of backs that up. That's a real concern. I don't see a problem with it, to be honest.
I know along the, you're right, like going into Lethbridge, but I know like on the QE2, there's quite a few of those digital signs now, but I think they just go from one advertisement to another. It's a quick flash. They don't dissolve or they don't have, but you know, like I think our community's small enough, I don't think it's going to be a big problem, you know, if they zigzag or whatever they do, yeah. Did I do that right? Was my animation good?
Like the new,
I know what I agree with you because I think we're a small enough community where it's not a big enough problem. My big concern would be if it's bothering sort of the residential area there. That's the only thing.
And I agree with you. I think
But like if it's on 2nd Street and they're, if they're going,
residential is a different thing, I think, right? But
go ahead.
So if you got these electronic signs, most of them are a lot even in the commercial downtown, there's residents, so is there something could be done about having them shut off at a certain time of night so they're not flashing, bothering residents? I know we had the one at this recreation center, people were complaining, there's no reason why they couldn't be shut down, maybe 11 o'clock till whatever, and solve that problem completely, because every sign that's up, there's a resident somewhere. But how much it affects them is a good question, so maybe the thing to do is to have them on timers or something. After 11 o'clock, you should be home anyway.
could that not be solved with the brightness thing, right? With the
I think at the rec center at the GBS, they didn't they? Maybe I don't know.
Tone
Somebody
them down,
they did tone them down.
but
Yeah.
they're still complaining about it. But to me, the simplest thing to do is if they're shut off at a certain time of night, then I don't know. Everything's so modern, there's no reason why they shouldn't be able to do it. Maybe it isn't a good idea. I don't know, but I think it should be looked at. Maybe I think.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I personally would like to see our signage evolve into motion. I think that shows tourists that we're moving forward. We're not stale, and people invest a lot of time and money in investment into good signage. You want to be seen. You want the exposure. And unfortunately, I recognize what Bill's saying, Councillor Bill. Maybe there should be some type of time setting because, you know, residents need to work, but we also are a shift work city. And if I'm only allowed to use my sign 12 hours a day, and I'd be a little frustrated with that. My one concern though too is that, and I don't know how this would work with our downtown district, the distance between each business, you know, our businesses are all close, so how does that work? I think our previous councillor, we talked about a community sign, and maybe that's something that we should revisit. maybe during our next budget deliberation. But I'd like to see full motion. I think that's the future. That's where things are happening and going. I like it when I go to the city, when I do get a chance to see the bright lights and see what's happening. So I think that's an important. We also live in a day where you can see inside people's cars now. Their lights are so bright inside their car because of their screens in their vehicles, right? So I get distraction, but there's lots of distractions in the world, and I don't think signs are a big distraction. So,
Any other questions? Oh, go ahead there, Alicia.
Thank you. I just want to make a comment about limiting the hours. I think that enforcement on that would be a very challenging thing, especially since we have signs that exist, and then you would have to determine if it was approved post the change of the land use bylaw, and then only police those specific signs. I think that might be a challenge for the time restrictions.
Yeah, I agree, because, for example, let's say there's a pizza place and it's close to an apartment. Well, you know, I mean, they're selling pizza at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. It's hard to kind of control that sign then. You know, yeah, so, yeah. Go ahead, Councilor.
I think too that when people are buying homes or, you know, moving into a neighborhood, people will put those into consideration. Do I want this? I think about, but on the same hand, I think about the Seinfeld episode where the chicken guy moved in across the street, and you know, it was a pain, the bright lights, and so that we have to be sensitive to people, but yeah, it'd be a challenge.
If I could add to that too, like I don't want to sound insensitive, but also, you know, if you're choosing to live, like let's say the JBS Center right across the street there, it's noisy, there's kids all over the place. You know that like during, you know, I don't know, events, there's a busy parking lot. It's not exactly like a quiet, you know, secluded place to live either. So I think I understand to a reasonable extent a complaint, but I don't know if you would be able to please all the concerns of somebody living in such an area. I do understand the complaint, but at the same time, you know, Joel's point, it would be difficult to enforce. I think it could potentially open up a whole other can of worms and make it more difficult than necessary.
Okay, did you have a comment there, Ray?
No, I was just thinking about residential areas and the sign at the JBS Center, and the people were upset. Some of them, the houses were certainly there long before the signs were. And, but I also think it'd be a big difference, I guess, when permits are being applied for.
Your mic's not on.
Do I have to start over? Okay. Okay, I'm just thinking about the JBS Center and the people that are living across the street from it, and the center has evolved, but being as old as I am, like Bill, I can remember when there was nothing there at all. So they were there first, and for them to be exposed to something disruptive or in any residential district, I think that's something that we have to take in consideration and protect the residents. So, and that's, I think, if you have a flashing sign pointing at your window, even when you have the curtains drawn, you're going to be getting that flash, flash, flash. So, you know, we have to, they've taken the intensity of lighting into consideration. And I think especially for residential areas, animation is a concern.
Yeah. Go ahead,
Just
Councilor
a
Woodruff.
question, just before we get too far in the weeds, because maybe this isn't even an issue anymore. Has there been reoccurring complaints since the brightness has been adjusted? Is that still an issue? Do you know?
I don't know.
No? Well, then there you go. Before we get. He just gave up. Oh. And
But-
what, one resident?
But
One for sure, but there's, I think, there's both said 2 or 3. And I went over and looked, and they did have a point.
yeah, go ahead, Alicia.
Can't hear me.
Well, they can't, the internet.
Can you hear me? Okay. Okay.
Now I
Alicia,
can,
go
yeah.
ahead. Oh, sorry, Alicia had something to say here.
I just wanted to note too, we're talking about residential, but there are, if you look in the table at the beginning that Madeline presented, that we are proposing electronic display only in certain land use districts, so not in residential. And there are still the restrictions on the distance from residential districts. And the JBS Canada Center is actually one of them that is put in as discretionary. So if we were to have a new application for a sign on a public building like that, it would have to go to MPC. It would not be approved by the development officer. So a lot of your concerns are kind of handled in that we're only suggesting it in certain land use districts and not in like a blanket allowing them everywhere, so.
Right, exactly, yeah. Just maybe to move, do we have a consensus that will allow animation then on our signs? Or moving parts? Just consensus, anybody? Yeah. Okay, no, yeah, I think we got a consensus from the council here that, yeah, we're fine with animation. Okay.
Great, I've noted that. Could I just clarify, because I heard we have those existing separation distances. So that is separation between like if you have two electronic signs, they have to be separated 100 to 200 feet from each other, depending on their sign size. And then the 50 feet separation distance from intersections and residential development. It sounds like there's maybe that support for the residential, but I want to clarify if council wanted to see those separation between electronic signs changed. So that would be freestanding electronic signs being required to be separated a certain distance from each other.
What if every business in our downtown got assigned, and that we're not, you know, the 15 meters or whatever it is away from each part there? So that's the scenario. Councilor, good enough?
How do you, sorry, I'm sure it's in here, but how do you define a freestanding sign? Would that be what's considered our realtor sign downtown? That's a freestand. So, but where home decor is, it's on their building, so that's a fascia. So when I think about our downtown, unless you're on the corner, you're really limited. You're not, unless you're going to take your window space away for a sign. There's a great disadvantage to a lot of these businesses.
Just to clarify, so the separation distance is just between freestanding signs. So if you imagined every single business could get a freestanding sign with electronic display, is that something you would want to allow? Or, I mean, they could, or would you want to have a separation between those? This is the question. So it's not related to fascia or any other kind of signs, just freestanding.
I think there should be separation between them, yeah. I think as you pointed out, yeah, if you had, otherwise you're packing them 2 meters apart and nobody would ever see a sign, right? Am I right? Yeah.
We can come back to it too if people want to mull that over.
Another question here, yeah.
Like when we say a freestanding sign, like, is it actually possible, as Councillor Goodenough said, like to put it anywhere except in the corners of downtown? Like when we say when we are talking about freestanding sign, it's like
7-Eleven.
It's yeah. Can we do that?
Yeah,
do we have the space in our community to do that? Like, except for example, maybe in the northern end.
So a freestanding sign, yeah, is just, it's not attached to a building. It's its own freestanding structure, right? And so right now that's a permitted use, like that's what we're proposing here. So obviously it depends on the site context. If where someone's, if someone's building is built right up to the front property line, then obviously they can't fit a freestanding sign. But if they have space in the front of their lot, then they can put one, the way the regulations are written.
Yeah, like the 7-Eleven sign would be a freestanding sign, like just on the corner there. Now, they could animate that too. But that's on an intersection. Is that allowed? But
that's what we need to understand is right now it wouldn't be because it's too close. So that we have the 15-meter separation from an intersection. So we just want to understand if those separation distances are working for the city or if you do want those adjusted.
where do we go?
And Sorry, I can't hear you if your mic's not on.
Sorry.
No worries, thank you.
Because, yeah, the one downtown, the 7-Eleven one would be how many meters or feet from the intersection is practically on it.
Yeah,
It
it is.
wouldn't
Yeah, it
fall,
is
it
on.
wouldn't be able to have one on that lot.
So,
Because
but,
the lot's too small to allow for that 50-foot setback from the intersection.
and is this just for freestanding signs?
That's correct, yeah.
Okay, so the one like for like, so Decorah would be like fine because it's not freestanding.
It's a fascia sign,
Right.
so the fascia sign, in Commercial Central is permitted and with electronic display, so we would allow them and there's no separation distance on those.
Yeah. I just can't think, and I don't know if I'm just not very creative, I just can't think of a whole lot of businesses that would even have this issue, you know? I agree that like maybe like, you know, it's not right there, but then what's the difference between having like a freestanding sign that's right on the intersection or the one that's on Decorah? It's still moving and animated, you're still
yeah, it's
looking
still
at
on
it
an
and reading it,
intersection,
so
yeah.
I don't know. I don't see.
I think some of the concern could be down the road when we develop Second Street more, where there's no development next maybe to Indian Pan Flame, and we've got that empty lot there if anything should happen. Or even with our hotels, if they want to eventually change to attract tourism. I think about McDonald's sign, whatever happens, we can't dictate what happens on the county side, but that's kind of my thinking. If there's going to be any more development of signs, I don't think downtown per se, that's not good use for your dollar. It'd be the new businesses that come in. And so this would be more affecting their, and how I see it. Or even, you know, for example, I'd probably watch the old midfield building there. If he had skidoos jumping, big screen of skidoos and motorbikes, that'd be kind of cool to watch. So I think that's where we're going to run into these issues, not necessarily as much downtown, but more for new development. I think that would be safe to say.
But I would think that the 16 meters or the 50 feet would be a fair distance. I mean, that's enough, short enough distance. I mean, that's only one property.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Between two signs, yeah.
I think between signs
Yeah.
is fair.
Yeah.
I don't really see the distance to the intersection though. For me, I don't know what you guys think.
And how far does it have to be from an intersection again?
50 feet, yeah, is how it's currently written in the land use bylaw.
It's not very far.
Is that standard? Because then that is a safety issue.
Yeah.
Once again, it's difficult because most like all the communities I work with don't allow freestanding electronic signs, so we don't really have, my experience in Edmonton is that, yes, there's a separation distance from intersections, but there's not as, I have read some reports about, impacts of digital signs on people and animals and those kind of, and vehicles and things like that. And a lot of them talk about that transition time and flashing and things like that. But there's not like one number or consensus about a distance from an intersection.
Yeah, that's one thing I would be concerned about as a safety issue. I think it'd stay at least 50.
Okay, yeah, no, I think we're fine with the 50 from the intersection, which isn't, I mean, it's a short distance there. Yeah. Go ahead, Ellen, yeah.
You know, and I think if you put those distances in and you get an application that maybe does make sense but doesn't meet those distances, that could go to the MPC, and if the safety issues aren't there, they could actually waive that condition and allow it to happen.
That's a good point, Alan. Yeah, these are all kind of the minimum requirements, but of course, based on the specific context, anyone can ask for a variance to these regulations, and then that can be evaluated on a case-by-case basis. And of course, the land use bylaw is also a living document that changes over time. So if we start to see more of these signs and then we see whether that is actually a concern or not, these regulations could be adjusted in the future. So I'm hearing consensus on 50 feet.
Oh, excuse me, Matt, Alan had one more comment here.
It's just
Sorry.
Like I look at that 7-Eleven sign and maybe they're gonna do a digital sign down the road, but it won't have any animation or any moving parts. And you're still gonna see it from a long ways away. It's not like you're right getting up to that
Yeah.
intersection. And that's where on a case-by-case basis, you could waive those conditions. If they start doing animation and you're driving right up to the corner, that's a little different for sure.
Yeah, so I think, Matt, I think the consensus here is that we're fine with the animation, but keep your distance as you put in there, for the intersections. Is that right?
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah, so I'm hearing 50 feet from the intersection and then 50 feet between signs with electronic display?
Yeah.
Okay, great, good. Okay, so I think I can move on to the next topic if everyone's
Oh, one
comfortable.
more, one more
Oh.
comment came from Alan.
Yeah,
I believe what I'm hearing too is you're suggesting that they be restricted to industrial and commercial general districts, but I think that I am hearing that they would allow them in the commercial central district as well.
right.
Yeah.
Well, we do have it listed as fascia with electronic display and freestanding with electronic display as permitted in commercial central, but a projecting sign or a window. So am I hearing that we want to see it on a projecting sign in a window as well?
I'm referring more to the animation. I think you recommend.
Oh, the
We
animation.
do allow the animation that we don't
Okay.
allow it in the commercial central district. And I believe council.
Oh,
thinks
yes.
It may be okay there.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Okay, thank you. It's just capturing that. All right. So the third topic I want to touch on is off-premise sign content. So this is also a bit confusing in the land use bylaw currently, but what we mean by off-premise sign content, sometimes also called third-party advertising, is sign content which advertises or otherwise identifies a service, product, or activity conducted, sold, or offered at a location other than the premises on which the sign is located. So basically you have a sign, but you're not actually advertising the business that's on that property, you're advertising something else. So currently your regulations prohibit off-premise advertising except for recreational, community, and or not-for-profit purposes. So that would be like if you have a sign at the school or something, you can, or a sign elsewhere, you could advertise, a community event or things like that. And then, of course, except for billboard signs, which are along the Trans-Canada Highway, since those are not actually on any businesses, they're advertising things that are off-premise. The land use bylaw also defines a maximum size for off-premise signs based on the speed limit. So first of all, we would just like to get rid of the regulations tied to speed limits. So saying that it's a maximum of 25 feet when the speed limit is 50 kilometers per hour or less, and a maximum of 50 feet squared when the speed limit is more than 50 kilometers per hour. So we just think this is a bit difficult to implement. So, the speed limit changes on the street based on safety or transportation reasons, then suddenly we have a sign that was permitted that is now non-complying based on that requirement. So we would recommend removing those regulations. Other regulations in the land use bylaw require a separation distance of 500 feet between signs with off-premise content. So we've just kind of talked about that separation distance for electronic display signs. So obviously would need to keep that consistent. And just for a reference point, which might have been helpful with the earlier discussion as well, is that a common block length in your commercial areas is 250 to 500 feet. So we're not really sure why separation distance would be required for off-premise advertising. It makes sense for the electronic display, but if it's a basic freestanding sign that doesn't have electronic display, but it does have off-premise advertising, we're not sure why that separation distance would be needed. So when we do talk about off-premise advertising, it'd be pretty uncommon to get that type of advertising unless it's an electronic display sign, right? So since the content can be regularly changed with electronic display, a business can advertise their own operation, and then they can also make money off ads for other companies. So you might see, a business that's a local business that's there, but then they can also run ads for McDonald's or whatever, and those ads can kind of cycle through. And sometimes what happens is these landowners or these business owners get paid by the sign companies to put up these signs, and then the sign company gives them, some amount of money, and then the sign company is making money off these other advertisements. So that's what we see in kind of bigger cities happen. So we just want to understand, right now that wouldn't be allowed the way the regulations are written, but we want to understand if council wants to allow off-premise advertising on different sign types and on signs with electronic display moving forward. One recommendation is that we just allow off-premise advertising on freestanding signs adjacent to the Trans-Canada Highway, and then any freestanding signs with electronic display, since that's where they're most likely to occur anyway. You could also look at allowing off-premise advertising on non-electronic freestanding signs or on fascia signs with electronic display. Really just see which way you want to go with that. So I'm going to stop there and see what council thinks about those questions.
Any questions on that one there? This would be similar to what we call our third-party advertising on the signs, right? Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that's another term for it. Just the term that we have in the land use bylaw currently is off-premise, but third party means the same thing.
So are we fine with that then? I mean, we do it right now.
Well, right now your land use bylaw doesn't allow it actually, unless it's for community events or nonprofit or things like that.
Oh, go ahead, Alicia, yeah.
It's the portable sign bylaw that allows third-party
Oh.
advertising.
Oh, right, oh, okay, good, thanks for the clarification on that. Yeah, the portable, yeah, okay.
But
Go ahead, Mohammed.
are we not trying to do something that is more, rather than having a portable in this, and like having one big thing that covers everything? So that the idea is that we will cover it all, because my understanding was that in the past, because it was in different bylaws or different regulations, some people.
Yeah, go ahead, Ellen. Yeah, go ahead, or Alicia, yeah.
The portable sign bylaw will still be separate from this, so these are just for these sign types. And right now, our land use bylaw doesn't allow third-party advertising on them, so we're just confirming if we want to now allow third-party advertising on these sign types, since we are now allowing it on the portable sign. We've actually had someone inquire about that recently as well.
An example would be, okay, I'll use maybe the Pattison sign and have it electronic. That would be, and then he goes out and sells advertising to 5 businesses. But let's say it's stationed up by, just across 15th Avenue up there. I'll just put it, but that's what we're talking. It would be a stationary sign, billboard sign, and then the third-party advertising, he could advertise for A&W, McDonald's or Dairy Queen or on and on. That's what we're looking at, and this is different, yeah.
Similar to the real estate sign downtown.
Yeah, except.
They could sell third-party advertising and show third-party advertisements on that sign.
Right. Okay. Go ahead,
I'd be in favor of that. I think whether it's on where we own land on the highway or to open that up, I think, when it's dark out, to kind of quote Mayor John, Mayor Petrie, is that, we've got to decorate our outside a little bit more, and I think that just draws attraction. We've got how many people driving by every day, our city, we need to be able to draw people in, and I think that's a winner idea, like to have the sign, come to town, shop local, do whatever, come shop, support Brooks, so.
So,
I think it's a win.
yeah, and just trying to okay, if somebody puts up a sign just on, let's say Fred owns the property there, Fred would make the money from that then, and the sign company would make the money. How does the city make any money on that?
We make money by people shopping, by coming in.
Yeah, no, and the reason, Council Goodenough, the reason I bring that up, and I know in the city, Pattison, does a lot of the signs, and I use Calgary as an example, and the city of Calgary makes a lot of money off those signs. That's, and I don't know how they generate the revenue from them. They would, yeah. So Pattison's making a lot of money. The business gets the advantage because they're advertising, and the city of Calgary makes money on that too. So I was looking at a way, how do we, maybe generate some revenue from that too? Okay, yeah, but I don't know. Yeah,
My assumption would be if we own the land, that's how we're going to make the property. So for example, if we go back to when we had the opportunity to maybe look at purchasing some land outside of town. So if we owned that, not to open up a can of worms, but if we owned that, you had a big sign, you're 20 minutes away from Brooks, or, last stop for gas until you
Okay,
hit
no,
Bazzano.
yeah, okay, now the question is do we allow the third-party advertising on a big billboard sign like that? So, okay, do we have, go ahead there?
We do allow the third-party advertising on a big billboard sign along the Trans-Canada Highway.
Right, along the Trans-Can, but if it was in town though, we don't do it in town, right? Not now, so the question is to do it in town. Are we in favor of that?
Would there be any limitations to how much a single corporation could advertise?
No. I don't, like, how do you control that then? I don't think, as a municipality, I don't know if, I know what you're saying
Do
would,
you know what I mean? Like, like if we're like thinking about like the way that like Brooks looks and feels, like everywhere you look, or if there was a substantial amount of this, like the same kind of signage, the same advertisement.
yeah, I know what
You know
you're.
what I'm saying?
Oh, you're saying, and I don't want to use McDonald's, but there's sort of the standard in the world, whatever, but you're saying, okay, McDonald's bought all 15 signs.
Yeah.
But that wouldn't, it wouldldn't be up to us to police that, though. I don't think we want to get into that situation on that unless we own the signs.
Yeah.
And we don't own the signs.
The only thing is I could see that being a potential issue. I know that it's not, place of government, but, if everywhere you look, you're seeing like, because something like McDonald's has so much money, right? Like they could really monopolize a lot of that advertising.
Or you could get a political party, the same thing.
Yeah, that's what I mean. So
Yeah, to dominate that, yeah.
Yeah, so I don't know, is there I don't know, a prudent kind of restriction that we I don't want to say restriction, but is there a way that we could make sure that not everywhere you look, you're seeing McDonald's, McDonald's,
yeah.
McDonald's,
Okay,
right?
Councilor, good enough, yeah.
I believe under our current portable bylaw, we don't allow outside city advertisements, right? Like the dentist from Redcliffe or Medicine Hat can't come, is that not correct? No? That is correct. We don't allow that.
We're getting conflicting comments here. Yeah.
I just want to bring the reason why I'm saying that is because I want to bring a correlation is if we have a bylaw like that already, we could then impose that on electric, that it has to be for local things, local events, like
Yes.
instead of us supporting, go to the Big Valley Jamboree in Tuktoyaktuk, it's no, you're coming to Brooks, right? We could set bylaws like that, I believe.
Yeah, we
If
could,
council
but
chooses.
do you limit the owner of the sign then on, you're depriving him of revenue then? Okay, go ahead, Joe.
Just to speak to that, I think what Madeline is getting at is we do have like the Pattison Company that would put up a sign that's out by the highway and they would advertise different businesses within the city and that's them making money.
Yeah,
But we're trying to get an idea of all of the other signs that are in town that are freestanding and electronic. If you're wanting, say, Decor a Home to be able to advertise for McDonald's and you're wanting to allow
right.
A&W to advertise for, that's a really bad analogy, but the way that our bylaw is written right now, it does control it as far as not everybody being able to use or put McDonald's on their sign, right? If you, I don't know, it's just personal preference, but the city could just be, if you don't limit it to special events and nonprofit organizations for each individual business and each individual sign, then you're just going to be mind blown by the amount of advertisement that's coming across on each sign for any business at any time, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does, and you have no, and then if you open it, you have no control. Because any, and I'll use political parties, but there could be other things, that could advertise, that maybe that we, go ahead, yeah.
I would be in favor of allowing businesses to advertise as much as they want and whoever they want. The reason why I say that is we would never limit the radio station to how many ads I can buy on there. If I wanted to buy all day, that's my prerogative. Or the newspaper, if I want to take out full-page ads. I don't believe that they're going to stop me from doing it. I think the same should be for the local sign companies. If I want it on my electric sign that I've put up with my money, then I should be allowed to do that and advertise who I want.
Yeah, Councilor Wardrop, yeah.
I see what you're saying, but would you want the radio to advertise like the same thing over and over and over again? Like, I get that it could be your prerogative,
Yeah, I
but
think we're talking two different things here now, though, too, but I know what you're saying. Basically,
like part
somebody could get into the sign business. I'll use, let's say, A&W there, they got the sign there. So really now she could get into the advertising business and advertise, she could put 50 different businesses on there. Go ahead, yeah, Ray, yeah.
Yeah, so I'm just looking at the recommendations, and the recommendation is to limit off-premises advertising to freestanding electronic display signs and freestanding signs adjacent to the Trans-Canada Highway. So that's, we're sort of being told this is what we should do. Is there a reason for that? Or, because the other way it could have been was, say, to not limit off-premises advertising. So how come the recommendation went in this direction?
I think it was just sought to be kind of a middle ground, accepting that people who have freestanding electronic signs are going to either want to use it in this way and go ahead and maybe use it in that way without being regulated or not, and that it makes more sense for the advertisers on a freestanding sign because typically those signs are more visible to driving by public versus like a fascia sign or things like that, which a projecting or fascia sign to me makes sense that those are more about identifying a business because they're attached right to the building, right? So that was just seen as being a middle ground. There are different options that you could do, like for example, in Picture Butte, how they have it worded is that off-premise signs shall only identify businesses or services licensed to operate in the town of Picture Butte, or that are members of the Picture Butte and District Chamber of Commerce, charitable organizations or service clubs. So that's how they identified it. But obviously, if McDonald's is operating within your city, then yeah, it could be all covered in McDonald's ads. Typically, you know, what will happen is it will be a sign company like Pattison. They're huge, you know, national organization, and they will just come in, they'll approach a landowner or a business operator and say, hey, would you like to put up a freestanding sign? We will give you this amount of money. And then they generate that ad revenue. So they manage what content goes on there. So it is difficult to kind of manage, to track that, right? Because they can just turn it off or switch the content, or like it's difficult from an enforcement perspective to track exactly what content is going on there. So that's something to consider, but there are ways to limit it. I'm not sure if that answered your question or not.
So the question again is about third-party advertising on those billboard signs. That's okay. Let's get that one solved. Are we fine with that, or don't do that one? Are we fine with that? Well, okay, no, there's two. No, okay, the highway's a little bit different there, okay? I'm thinking of one in town. Yeah. That's the first, we're fine with third-party advertising on the big signs. The second one is, do we bring in a bylaw to do like Picture Butte, and they can only be advertising for businesses in the city of Brooks? But do we want to get into that? What's that? I know, that's why, yeah, it's hard to police.
We don't want to do something that we can't police.
Right,
It's got to
yeah.
be straightforward.
Yeah.
And that's why we don't want to have, who are we going to send out there to police and
Yeah.
keep track of it?
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's got to be simplified so that, okay, you can advertise here, there you go, here, get your permit, fine.
Yeah, I agree. It's hard to police, yeah.
Yeah, we
because
can't police
Yeah,
it.
we'd have to have somebody that, well, yeah, okay.
And
Go
then
ahead,
we
Alicia.
also-
No,
oh,
sorry.
sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead, Alicia.
We didn't put those restrictions on the portable sign bylaw,
Okay.
that they have to be a local business. We did not, so.
Okay, no, that's fine. And I'm okay. I'm fine with that. Okay. Go ahead, Marissa.
And then the portable sign, was there an issue then with that? Even, was there an issue with like, the limiting the, I guess like the, do you know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah.
Was there an issue with the portable sign law, bylaw because you didn't have that in there?
We just added it. We did not allow third-party advertising prior. It was only for community events.
Right.
And it was decided by council, by the past council, that we would allow third-party advertising, one per business. And that's the way it stands now.
By rewriting the portable sign bylaw and allowing a business that's on 7th Street or in the industrial area to advertise on 2nd Street West, we did limit it per lot and how many signs, how many third-party advertising signs could go on per lot. But what we're asking now is, we did make that change through the portable sign bylaw, but would you also like to see it made through every other sign in town? Making every sign capable of third-party advertising, not just the portable signs.
But with those limitations that you, right, that you can't just have, sorry, maybe I'm not understanding it, maybe I'm confused. But with the limitations that you said, like that there is a maximum, because you said there could be one sign,
So
right?
this would be based on freestanding signs. So the
Just
limitations on freestanding signs, as Madeline's proposing, is that we would allow it on freestanding signs in the city. And there are already limitations on freestanding signs that we just discussed previously. So the spacing between them and the spacing from intersections. So those limitations would still fall on freestanding signs, and therefore any freestanding sign that is permitted would allow third-party advertising.
Go ahead, Joe.
I think maybe, and I don't want to speak for all of council, but I thought we were talking about electronic signs and the amount of advertising, not portable signs.
I think they were just using the sort
Okay,
of the
so,
comparison.
'cause I would
Yeah, yeah,
not
no,
wanna
no,
see-
you're right, it is.
I don't want to see a change in our portable
no,
bylaw sign.
no,
We've
no.
already worked on that for so long.
Yeah.
So electronics is, okay, please, yeah, okay, thank you.
So theoretically, what could happen if there's an electronic sign and there could be up to, I mean, there could be 40 different businesses that it rotates every 10 seconds, right? Right, Madeline? Yeah. Yeah, so that's the but then going back to what John says, we can't police. All we can really decide today is, do we allow third-party advertising? I don't think we should get into policing what goes in that thing, right? Do we agree with that? Yeah, are we fair with that? Okay, I think we finally got a consensus here. So does that make sense? We allow with the third-party advertising, but we're not going to control the content. Go ahead,
So my question is just the third-party like what sign types, I guess, that you want to allow it on? So the recommendation was to allow it on freestanding electronic display signs and on any freestanding signs along the Trans-Canada. Did you also want to allow it, like say you have a fascia sign that allows electronic display, would you like to see third-party advertising allowed on that as well? Or on a window sign or anything like that, projecting?
For example, here in town, again, Decora Home, that's a fascia sign. Would you like to see Decora Home advertising for McDonald's or for KFC?
But if the freestanding sign is doing it, why not her? Like, then it'd be just fair. But, yeah, right?
I just have to say one more time, and sorry to be sticky about this, but we're so small, right? We're so small, and there's only so many signs, and I know that it's hard to enforce, but if the purpose here is to improve the way look and feel, it would be difficult to, a corporation with a lot of money or business could really monopolize on all of this third-party advertising, and you would just see it everywhere you go, and there's not that many places to look, right? That's my only concern, and then once we have that in there, it'd be hard to scale back.
But at the, just not to put the portable sign in there, but somebody could do the same thing with the portable signs in town too, the third party. They could monopolize them and we have no control over that either. No different than in Calgary with the Pattison sign. Somebody could basically go buy every one of the portable signs in Calgary.
Right, but we're so much smaller though.
Yeah, I agree with you there, but the problem is how do we police that though? That I don't think I don't think we want our administration to, or our bylaw officers to be policing that. It's kind of like goes back to John says, do you sit out there, and wait, okay, well, there's 8 signs on there and 2 of them are not, oh, yeah. The problem is policing it.
Yeah.
We can bring it in, but policing it, and I don't think we want our administration or our bylaw officers, cut down in this. And again, we're small enough, I don't think we,
Could we potentially, limit a business to how many locations, like additional locations they're
Yeah, and
allowed?
then we're getting into policing it again, the way.
But that wouldn't be that, would that be
Well, that would go
super
through
complicated?
would that be the policing it, or MPC would have to decide on that, but, yeah, and then you get into policing it again, so. That's the hard, that's the hard part, Marissa. I know where you're coming from.
You know what I
on
mean,
that,
though,
yeah.
but like, I don't want to, everywhere I look at like the 5 or 6 electronic signs that we have,
It'd be
like,
the same thing.
yeah,
Yeah.
it would,
But like I say, until we find a way to police it, and I say, I don't want to put that on the bylaw or administration to do that. Okay, Counselor, good enough. Yeah, last word. No, go ahead. Okay, the consensus is, I think we agree with the third-party advertising, but we can't agree with, do we agree with not control? Okay, except for Marissa, do the rest of us kind of agree that, that we really can't control what's advertised on there?
We agree, there's just no way we can
Right.
control it. Unless
Right.
we hire somebody to do it, then
Yeah.
we're defeating,
Yeah, okay.
Well, I could use the money.
Okay, I'll use my last chance to talk.
Okay,
I
last,
think a lot of businesses are smart not to over-advertise, and we are limited in budget. Other than, I can only think of maybe 1 or 2 other major companies in our city that have that ability to do that. So I think we're fairly safe in saying that, so.
yeah, okay. Now, you got some nice clear direction there, Madeline?
So just to be clear, because what you have right now is that you don't, within the city, aside from those billboards on the Trans-Canada, you don't allow third-party advertising. So what you're saying now is that you would allow third-party advertising on any sign type at all, or any sign with electronic display,
Alicia, what's my
or
answer?
just freestanding signs? I'm still a bit confused.
Well, our recommendation was freestanding, and I know there was discussion too about the fascia sign, so that's up to you guys for your preference.
Go ahead, Alan, give us the answer.
Well, I don't have the answer, but I think the recommendation was freestanding with electronic.
Okay, let's go with that then, yeah, okay, freestanding with electronic, okay. Is that clear now?
Yes, and once again, does not have to be forever, so you guys can always revisit this discussion if you want to. So we can try that and see how that works. Okay, so that was really all of the really meaty topics. So this next section should be a little bit easier. So in this next topic area, number 4, is where we're really looking at, topic 3, I guess. No, 4, okay. Where we're looking at just some changes to all the other kinds of sign types. So moving on from electronic display. So I'll just go through the proposed changes and the rationale for why we're suggesting the change. So once again, this is not covering like smaller wording or grammar updates or things like that, which are shown in attachment 1. These are more like bigger changes that we wanted to propose. So first of all is with temporary signs. Right now, we require all temporary signs to get a development permit. And temporary signs are just posted for 30 days. So they're meant to advertise short-term offers or events. So we're suggesting that those don't require a development permit if they comply with all the regulations of the land use bylaw. The fact that they're only posted for 30 days, going through that permit process can sometimes take week or two, right? Depending if the applicant has everything in order. So it seems to be an unnecessary burden for the applicants and the city to have to go through that review process when the sign is only meant to be up for 30 days. Still having those regulations in place allows that if a sign is up too long and someone complains about it, we can still kind of enforce on that and request that they require that they take that down. So that's one change to temporary signs. When it comes to billboard signs, so billboard signs are basically just large freestanding signs that are set up along the Trans-Canada Highway. So right now there are regulations that require these, because most of these signs are on land that's undeveloped. So it might be zone direct control or future urban development. So there's not actually any development on that land, even though it's within the city of Brooks. And so there's wording within the land use bylaw that requires that these signs be removed once development commences, which is kind of vague and difficult to implement. It also requires separation distances and different sign size based on the highway speed and things like that. So what we're suggesting is just to get rid of that category of billboard signs, because for all intents and purposes, they're the same as a freestanding sign, and instead just include some regulations for freestanding signs adjacent to Trans-Canada Highway, that they are regulated more by Alberta Transportation, and that we require Alberta Transportation approval prior to them submitting a development permit to the city. So the rationale for these changes is that basically the structure of the sign is the same as a freestanding sign. It's just about their location. And it's important that the sign meets the Alberta Transportation standards for safety. And therefore, if we require their approval first, then we're ensuring that the applicant doesn't waste their time on an application with the city, and then they could end up getting denied a permit by the province. So that's the suggestion for billboard signs. For canopy signs, these are signs that, you know, if you have a canopy over the top of over the door or something over the business, that this would be signage that is on that canopy. So we've just noted that some of the wording's unclear or causes confusion, and there was also no statement of how many canopy signs or canopies you could have on a business. So we're just kind of cleaning that up, specifying that you can have one canopy sign per business frontage, just ensuring that the wording's consistent in different sections, deleting regulations that are already covered by the general regulations section in the sign bylaw, just to kind of simplify a bit there. And there was also a regulation that specified the materials for a canopy sign that was quite restrictive. We'd rather just see the materials be at the discretion of the applicant, as long as the sign is durable, because we have a general regulation about the sign being durable and you know, maintained in good standing. So we think that those changes make the regulations easier to understand and apply for the applicant and the development authority. When it comes to fascia signs, as we've talked about, those are signs, you know, that are on the building base. So once again, we've just kind of updated the wording so that regulations are consistent across the different sections, and deleted kind of repetitive regulations. For freestanding signs is where we have a little more questions for council. So we did add a regulation to allow multi-tenant signs to count as one freestanding sign structure. So that's, you know, when you have a business, be a strip mall or whatever, that has multiple business bays in it, they might just choose to do one sign and then have those different businesses listed underneath. So we just count that as one freestanding sign. As mentioned, we're suggesting regulating billboard signs, so signs along the Trans-Canada under the freestanding signs section. And then one thing that we want to get some direction on is the maximum sign area and height depending on the land use district. So the way the freestanding sign section is written right now, it just kind of allows a pretty large signs. And now that we're saying, okay, you can have those in residential high density or in you know, the commercial central or the commercial neighborhood, we'd like to see the size kind of reflect the uses that are allowed in those land use districts. So if you scroll to the page, I guess there's no page numbers on this memo, but there's a table that suggests different sign sizes, so sign areas and then sign heights based on the land use district. And there's some example kind of pictures below that. So what we're suggesting is in that residential high density and commercial neighborhood that the sign size based on the building or the frontage of the lot is 10 meters or less in length, then you can have a sign that's 2 meters squared. If you're in the commercial central, you can have one up to 5 meters squared. In the commercial general and industrial, you can have one that's 7.5 meters squared. And then in the public land use districts, you can have one that's 5 meters squared. Then if you have a larger business or building frontage, then those sizes increase as shown in the table. And then also looking at maximum heights, 3 meters or 10 feet for residential high density and commercial neighborhood, 20 feet for commercial central, and then 33 feet for the commercial general and industrial, and 20 feet for the public. So that's kind of just to help you understand how those numbers relate to buildings that might be on the lot or adjacent. Maximum building height in pretty much all of our land use districts is 40 feet. So generally that's about 4 stories. A typical story is 8 feet to 5 to 12 feet. And then most buildings in Brooks, are more around that 1 or 2 story height. So just to give you an idea of how we've kind of tied those heights to what you might see as just kind of a sign that's a height of 1 story when you're in that residential high density or commercial neighborhood, with the recognition that you might have a single detached house across the street or something like that. And then it kind of goes up as you move into higher intensity land use districts. So maybe I'll just stop there before covering the last few sign types to see if there's any comments on those images or sign sizes or heights. And once again, this is not for electronic display necessarily, but for just a regular freestanding sign, which may or may not have electronic display depending on the land use district.
Any questions? Okay. Oh, Alan has one.
Yes, sorry, Madeline, I didn't catch this earlier, but what you're proposing to do is bring the billboard signs into the freestanding sign section. So what we have for billboards right now with the size, would this accommodate the size that we have there?
Let me just, that's a good question. I need to just double check. I'm just pulling up that attachment one to double check that. And I think we would keep that height consistent, because within the freestanding sign section, we would just have a few, a kind of subsection of regulations that apply to freestanding signs adjacent to the Trans-Canada Highway. So the maximum is bigger for the billboard signs. So more like it goes up to, over 500 square feet. So we could reflect that in there. But where these sizes were more meant for within the city, not the billboards ones.
So just for clarification then, billboard signs will be covered under the freestanding sign section. However, there will be a specific regulation for the ones that go along the highway that let them be bigger, allow them to be bigger. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, that's how we just to kind of simplify, propose kind of structuring that.
Okay, continue. Yeah.
So any other comments on those sizes, or we can come back to that too if you need to kind of absorb those. So the next few projecting signs, same thing, just kind of simplifying, deleting regulations that are repeated. One thing, we had a regulation that kind of talked about the placement of the projecting sign specifically on the building face, just kind of deleting that because obviously applicants are going to put the placement of the projecting sign in relationship to the building face in a way that it's most visible to customers. So trying to remove some of those regulations that seem unnecessary. Roof signs, this is not a common sign type that we have in Brooks, but we did want to just ensure that the regulations are easier to understand and clearer to applicants. So made some changes in the wordings of those. Blade signs is what right now in the land use bylaw are called shingle signs or under canopy signs. So these are the small pedestrian-oriented signs that stick out from a building, or if you have a canopy, they might be attached to the canopy and coming down, but they're quite small in size, more pedestrian-oriented. So we just changed the word to blade because that's a more, the city and the county has, a blade sign program. So we just wanted to reflect that name so that it's consistent across different programs. So there was also previously a restriction that blade signs, if you had a blade sign, then you couldn't have a freestanding, or the area of fascia sign was decreased if you had a blade sign. But blade signs are so small and pedestrian oriented, it seemed unnecessary to restrict other sign types related to them. So we just wanted to remove that requirement. For window signs, this is a bit of a challenge, I guess, for implementation. Currently, a development permit is required for all window signs, but many people just put them up without seeking a development permit, probably not even aware that they need one, right? So what we're suggesting is that we do require a development permit for window signs, but only if more than 50% of the window area is covered. So if someone's just putting up smaller signs in the corner of their window, go ahead, do that without a development permit. But if you're proposing like to paint your whole window or to do, cover the whole surface of your window face with signage, then we just would ask that you come in for a development permit for that. Also just wanted to remove the regulations that are covered by the home occupation section of the land use bylaw. Already has some regulations for window signs just specifically for home occupation. So we're just making sure that that's not duplicated. And that's our recommendation for window signs. So I think that covers all the kind of signs, different sign type changes that we wanted to make. Obviously, it's a lot more shown in the attachment, and it will become a little clearer once the attachment can be hard to read with all of the stuff crossed out. We're just showing what's getting deleted and reworded. But when you see the eventual bylaw, that will be a clean copy that will show exactly how the sign section will look. So questions, comments on those proposed changes?
Yeah, Councillor Goodenough.
Wish we had more councillors. So just a quick question on the window signs. If it was a new business, do they have to get a separate, would that be in their business permit application? I think about our marijuana stores that have to have their windows blacked out. So would they have to get a special permit for that, or?
Those are federal regulations, which would trump anything that we have provincially in the land use bylaw.
Okay.
So as far as the marijuana shops, if that's the federal regulation, then it has to be, that's the way it has to be.
Okay, and then, I don't know how much I even like this part of the bylaw personally, because it's my business. If I want to 100% of the window, I don't know if I should have to have a special permission to do that, but.
Just, and maybe somebody can, why do we have this in here too? Like, if I have a big window and I want to paint it all and something, why should it be restricted? Alicia or anybody?
I mean, I'm not sure I have an answer for that. That's how your regulations were written, prior to me being involved. I mean, I think what some communities might feel is that if every storefront, say in your commercial central, had every window covered with signage, that just has a different feel than, say, if you can look into a retail store and see, displays or see things for offer on sale or see people shopping or things like that. It just has a different feel than if the whole window surface is covered with advertising, but that's really just a preference. I'm not sure why it was written that way in the first place.
Yeah, go ahead, Alicia.
We tried to pick, as Madeline mentioned, right now, all of them need permits, but we don't ever see permits for window signs. So we tried to pick, I guess, it was just a suggestion that if 50%, then maybe we would want to see it. Again, we don't ever see them, so.
Do we need that in there then? We don't, the window sign, that, even that, could you delete all?
It's up to you, yeah, if you want to just require, not just have no development permit required, like, so basically you can have a window sign with no development permit, then that can be an option.
Okay, what's the consensus here then?
I'd be okay with that.
Go,
I'm just trying to visualize what people would put on their whole inside window if they didn't have to pay for a sign there. Would people start painting their name on their inside window or?
or sale today or
Yeah,
something?
yeah,
I
I'm just
know,
kind of
yeah,
wondering what kind of reaction it's going to be. I can't possibly think of anything. I don't know why the problem with only having a certain percentage.
50%,
Yeah, like it's good the way it is. If you can only do 50% on the window, like you might want to put your little sewing sign out and just leave it there. And I don't feel like you should have to pay for that. But then I'm just trying to come up with a scenario where it could backfire on us, but I can't come up with one.
Just to highlight, you can actually see in the attachment 1 under the window signs definition. I'm sorry, there's not page numbers on that attachment either, but you kind of have to scroll down, like it's closer to the end. There's actually 2 pictures in there. One shows, a small window sign for analog books, what that looks like, and one shows, what they have, maybe like 2/3 of their whole front painted with like a Coke ad. So you can kind of just see what that might look like if it's a little advertisement versus a larger one, just for reference.
Yeah, I'm still of the thing that I don't know if we really need, I don't know if we have to sort of police what a business sort of does with their property on that. But and again, if nobody's getting development permits or permits for that, yeah, so. Go ahead, Alan.
What you can do if you don't want to require permits for them, still have them in there and just say, as long as they meet the other requirements of the bylaw, then they know they won't be able to do third-party advertising or anything like that. So
Good point. Yeah. Okay. Are we fine with that? Yeah, I think that's fine. We're fine with that. Yeah. Oh, we can't hear you. Still can't hear you.
Sorry, sometimes I'm typing, so I mute myself so you don't hear my clickety clack. Sorry, just to clarify too, I guess if I go back up to the table, we were allowing in the commercial, general, and the industrial districts that you could have window signs with electronic display. Did we want to require those ones get a permit, or also just allow that without a permit?
So these would be an electronic sign I put in the window that says open and come in.
No, it wouldn't be like open, or it'd be like I think Alicia or Natasha has some examples where like the real estate office or whatever, they'll have like they'll put like a screen in the window and it will actually like display ads that can change and stuff.
So for example, at the new Remax Center, they have digital displays on the windows so that people can actually still shop for a house when they're walking down Center Street and they don't have to go in or be open. And those right now would require a permit, but if we removed window signs, then that would be okay. However, what Madeline's asking is, do you want to differentiate between them being electronic window signs other than just the open and closed signs?
Could we treat the electronic window signs like the, what are they called, the ones that are just on the face of the
fascia?
The fascia signs? Have them kind of comply with the same rules?
Yeah, I think what I'd just be wondering is if, like, what we could do is just say no development permit signs required for window signs unless they have electronic display, and then you do, or we just create, size restrictions or whatever for the electronic display, and same thing, if you comply with that, you don't need to get a development permit.
Okay.
But I'm guessing you wouldn't want to see like a whole window covered in, a ton of screens or something like that, right? So might just want to restrict that to some extent. But we could also, whether we require a development permit or not for that too is up to you.
What do you think, Alicia? Well, no, and I ask because if nobody's getting a development permit for a window, would they, get a development permit for that? I mean, and again, it's going back to Joel, whatever, it's their own business, they can put something in there. I mean, yeah, so.
I guess I look at it as what's the likelihood of someone actually doing that, where their entire window
Well,
is
that's-
an electronic display.
Yeah.
That's what I was gonna
Yeah.
say, that if they get carried, well, it's free, so then they cover up their whole front window with something like that. Like, I don't have a problem with saying, no, you don't need a permit for that, but only up to a certain size.
Well, doesn't the new real estate building have one of those? Right?
Yeah,
So it'd look like that.
Even the real estate office right over here on the corner, I'm not sure which one it is. Is that the Remax, Natasha? They have one outside on their window as well, and it just shows real estate listings.
But again, they're using, I think, their common sense, and they're not covering their entire windows with the electronic display. They're,
but the question for us is, do we make them get a development permit for an electronic sign? So do we or don't we? So Joel says no, Marissa says maybe, I say no. John?
I say no up to a certain size.
Okay, then you say yes?
I would say you don't need a permit if it's under less than 60% of the window size.
Okay.
Because you gotta have a percentage, because you,
Yeah.
why what?
Well, I don't understand your logic to why 60%, like why
Well, you
that
don't want them to
number?
cover the whole window. What if, so what?
But why?
Well,
Like,
because they cover the whole window, then they're gonna have to get a permit for a sign.
Okay.
You see what I mean? You want everybody to start covering the whole front window with
Electronic signs.
these flashing signs or whatever, because then people will do it. But if you say you're not gonna use 60% of your window, you don't have to get a permit. But as soon as you start going over that, or 50%, whatever, as soon as you start going over that, then you're gonna have to get a permit.
Go ahead, Mohammed.
So what's the problem if they do it?
What's the what?
What's the problem if they do it?
Well, then you're gonna have signs all over the place.
No, if they are not advertising another, like we said.
Well,
not-
let's
not
go with the
third-
real estate
not
sign
third
right
party,
now.
not third party advertising,
Yeah.
and it's not intersection flashing and all of, so safety is not an issue. So what's the problem?
My only thing would be, because like if they could, you could put your whole window there, it would be potentially the same size as what's the
Billboard.
front facing one called again? Fascia, like
yeah, yeah.
as those, and so people could, like, if there's no permit, it would be, people would not get a permit in favor of just putting it in their window, right? Because like if it's the same amount of size, that's the only thing I could see, right, is that people would start putting them in their windows instead of nice signage on the front of their stores or whatever.
Yeah, go ahead, Joel.
I guess just my concern is, we're telling businesses how to run their business. If they feel that their market research has said, hey, a big sign on our front window is gonna attract business, I don't wanna be the person that says, I'm sorry, no, you can't. That's my fear. I think we have to, we talk about red tape reduction. I think we're now creating a bunch of red tape, and let the businesses do what the businesses do, and let us do what we have to do.
But it's just, it would be no different than I guess I'm just not seeing the difference between needing a permit to have a sign that big that's electronic, that's like,
Or painting your whole window.
no, but, or like having one that's that big and it's electronic, it's inside the window, right? Or one that is technically outside of the window, the exact same size with all the same features.
Yeah.
That's
Right,
what-
yeah.
You know what I mean? So like they're
A fascia
essentially the
sign
same
to
thing.
Inside.
And
yeah,
we
yeah.
would require a permit if
Yeah.
it was outside the window. So that's what I'm asking, right? Like, I'm not saying like, because they would need to get a permit, right?
Yeah. Go
The
ahead,
other
Alan.
way.
Yeah.
I guess we'd have to decide, are we asking them to get the permit just because it's over a bigger size and we're gonna approve it anyways? And if we're doing that, then of course we're putting red tape in front of them.
Yeah.
That is needless. Unless we want to do that to maybe limit the size that they can do, but if they only need a permit just because it's bigger, then it's, a waste of time approving it, a waste of time for them applying. But if we're concerned that it's too big for a certain reason, then that's different.
Could we require a permit just if it's an electronic size or electronic sign in the window?
I think we just said no to.
Yeah, I think we said no to that. We said no to.
To anything in the,
In the window, then we got into the size of that. And now, so, okay, so the consensus is, I think Mohammed, I, and Joel say no permit regardless of what size, and now.
I can be swayed. I would like to see a size, but,
Yeah.
I mean, if the
Yeah.
consensus is any size you want, I still don't agree with it, but I can
Yeah.
be swayed.
Okay, okay, and so.
it doesn't make sense to me if it's in or out, but whatever.
Okay.
I can see.
Okay, oh, sorry, Mohammed,
I think part of the inside-outside issue for me is that when it's an outside issue, there is it's a public area, like to a degree, it's a public area.
And then it would become a fascia, basically, right? Yeah, and then they would need a permit if it's outside the window. Yeah, if it's inside the window, they could put a big screen TV and flash whatever they wanted on that, yeah. Okay, all right, is that now clear as mud again, Madeline?
So what I'm hearing is just no development permit required for window signs of any type, no matter if it's has electronic display or not.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, yeah. Okay, we good? Okay, yeah.
Okay, so we're on to the last topic, which is actually not related to signs. It's just that we're seeing since we're doing this amendment, it's an opportunity to kind of update a few other things that we keep in our back pocket as we use the land use bylaw and realize it's not quite working. So as I mentioned before, land use bylaw is a living document, requires updates from time to time to improve its usability and respond to changes to policies or development. So over the last year, as staff have used the land use bylaw, we've been keeping track of any regulations that don't make sense or need refinement. So if this sign amendment is to move forward, we figure it's also an opportunity to make some of these smaller edits to the land use bylaw that are more of administrative housekeeping updates. So I just have them summarized here, but obviously when the bylaw comes forward, you would see the full detail of what those are. But I'll just run through them. So updating the barrier-free parking stall requirements to match National Building Code standards. So since those regulations were written in the land use bylaw, the National Building Code standard changed slightly. So we would just be updating our standards to match theirs. Updating a couple of our use definitions to clarify what activities can be accessory or part of that primary use. So just basically whether you can have an administrative office or something like that, putting that right into the definition so that it's clear that that's allowed. Wanted to just slightly increase the residential garage wall height based on industry standards. Clarify maximum projections into flankage yards. So we had in our land use bylaw, we specify what the maximum flankages are allowed into side, front, rear yards, but we just don't say flankage. So that can cause some confusion. So just adding that in. In our RHD land use district, we have this weird thing where we have a site coverage that's different for permitted versus discretionary uses, which is the only land use district that has that. So we just want to get rid of that and keep it consistent with all our other land use districts. Updating the parking requirement for entertainment facilities. So this for councillors who were on council before when we changed the uses. This was just something that got missed because we combined amusement establishments and entertainment facilities. And so then the parking, they had different parking requirements, and we picked the more onerous parking requirement, and we want to reduce that parking requirement now that those two uses are combined. And then another change is removing what we call the build within area for front setbacks in residential land use districts. So right now, all of our residential land use districts have a front setback minimum and maximum, and this just results in a lot of variance requests. And instead, we just want to require a minimum setback, which is more standard for all other kind of communities and land use bylaws, and then just specifying the maximum distance a front attached garage can project from a house. So that will simplify the land use bylaw somewhat. So those are those extra changes that we would just tack on to the signs amendment to fix when we bring that forward as a bylaw. So that was a lot of material to get through. I appreciate you listening and really grappling with those regulations and those electronic display questions. It's good to have that discussion and some clarity from council. So the recommendations are, which I think we've kind of gone through, and I have heard consensus on those different, what you've identified for those different questions. So basically we would be looking to kind of move this forward to prepare a land use bylaw amendment to Schedule 5 signage standards and the additional land use bylaw updates noted, and bring that forward for first reading at a council meeting in January. And then after that first reading, there would be a public hearing prior to second and third reading. So we just want council to identify if they require any additional public engagement aside from the public hearing. So that would be my final kind of recommendations or questions. And of course, there's also the option to bring it back to council committee again if needed.
I don't know if we have to bring it back to council committee, do we? What do you think, Alan? I don't think, I think we solved it. Did we solve all the problems?
If everybody thinks they've solved all the problems and understand it, then you wouldn't have to bring it back to committee. If you're not comfortable with where it is yet, then you would.
I think when we have our public consultation, right, that's when they're going to bring back recommendations. I will assume there will be some feedback, so we'll have to reconsider then, wouldn't we?
Yeah, and then we can bring it back, but I think she's gonna take it back, and then I think we bring the first reading and then we go into the public consultations after that, yeah. And then if there are changes, then we have to bring it back, if we wanna change it. Yeah, go ahead, Al.
I think what Madeline was requesting, once we do first reading, we can do one of two things. We can go directly into the public hearing, not that meeting, but we do have to have a public hearing. I think she's requesting, do you want, in addition to the public hearing, further public consultation in the open house or some sort of manner before you move forward with it?
I think, let's go through the first reading there, and then I think what we do then is sort of advertise and put it out there, and then if people have feedback, and then they can come back and then advertise their open house, and they can and then come to our open house on that then. Would that work then? Is that the way it goes then? Like, I mean our public hearing, not our open house, but our public hearing.
Yeah, so just to clarify the process. So normally what we do is we bring it forward for first reading, and then we would circulate, put an ad in the newspaper about the public hearing, and then you'd have it on the website and things like that. So then if we got any letters or emails or comments, we would accept those or answer people's questions, and then people can come and present in opposition or in favor at the public hearing. And then normally if, it's a less complicated amendment or just a rezoning or something, council would move forward with the second and third reading at that same meeting. But if you are hearing a lot of feedback or questions and you want to wait to do the second and third reading or request changes before moving it forward, then you can do that. But another option is to have an open house or something prior to it moving forward to even a first reading or a second or third reading.
Let's go with your first plan. No, let's go with your first plan. Okay. Let's bring it and then do the advertisements on that, and then do the public hearing then, And then, like I say, we're getting a lot of comments at the public hearing, and then we can we don't have to pass the second and third reading that day. We can take it back then. So let's do it that way.
Okay.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, is that good? Yeah, is that good with everybody? Yeah, okay, Okay. Is that it, Madeline?
That's all the direction I needed. I don't know, Alicia and Natasha's, did we get everything we needed? I think so.
Yeah, that was a fast 15. That's a fast 15 minutes you had.
Yeah, time stood still.
Okay, well,
okay.
Thanks for your time this evening.
Yes, thank you for your patience going through all of this. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Next. Oh, okay. Do we need a little break here, or are we good? Yeah. Are you leaving then, or what time are you leaving? Well, yeah, just, if Mohammed leaves, I just. Okay, we'll continue
Yes.
on. Yeah. Okay, let's continue on here. Okay. Where are we at here now? The offsite levy policy and framework. Okay, Alicia again. Okay,
Yeah.
go ahead.
Okay, with the offsite levy report and bylaw being updated, there's a need to develop an offsite levy policy and practices framework to support ongoing management of the bylaw. The purpose of the document is to outline levy exemptions, deferrals, installment payments, indemnification, interim financing, front-ending reimbursement, offsite infrastructure inspection, acceptance, warranty, interest on unpaid balance, interest rate changes, and inflation rate changes. Attached for Council's review and consideration is an offsite levy policy framework. This framework provides direction to both staff and the public on how the offsite levy process works and includes figures 1 through 5, which show the steps to consider in assessment and collection, levy deferment, levy collection, front-ending process, and front-ending claim reimbursement. There's times when an application of subdivision or development is exempt from the offsite levy obligation. Based on legislation, once a development area has been assessed, an offsite levy of a specific type, it may not be subject to further levies of the same type. Also incorporated in Table 1 of the policy are exemptions granted by the city. These include subdivision/development, which does not use offsite levy infrastructure to a greater extent than it was used previously. The policy also allows for deferment of offsite levies over a 2-year period for any levies exceeding $400,000. The developer would be required to provide a letter of credit in the amount of the levies being deferred, as well they would sign a deferral agreement with the city. 50% of the deferred levies would be due on the first-year anniversary date, and the remaining balance owing would be due on the second-year anniversary date. One thing to note is that when levies do increase due to our annual review, the amounts owing would be based on the new rates at the time of payment and not those determined at the signing of the agreement. Front-ending is required when an offsite infrastructure project is to be completed prior to the full collection of the offsite levies. This can be undertaken by either the city or a developer at the direction of the city. Developers who front-end the construction of offsite infrastructure may offset levy assessments on the same category of offsite infrastructure up to the cost of infrastructure constructed. When the cost of construction exceeds offsite levies payable, interest is earned on the balance due to the developer and is paid per annum upon final repayment. Therefore, staff recommends that policy number E002008D, the offsite levy policy and framework, be forwarded to council for approval.
Any questions or comments? So where do we go from here then? We just take it back? Or go ahead, Alan, yeah.
Yes, this is a recommendation to council
Yeah.
to approve the policy. The bylaw will be coming back. When does that come back?
On the 20th, on Monday.
on Monday, the
Okay.
20th. So we would go through and approve the bylaw first and then the policy.
Okay. Any questions? This might be really simple here, eh? Okay, all in favor of the recommendation then? Okay. Okay, good,
Onward.
thank you. Okay, the next one, is Dawn's?
No, it's mine as
Oh,
well.
yours too, eh?
Okay, so Alberta Transportation has been reviewing inconsistencies with mapping, data, and signing of numbered highways. Provincial signage guidelines for municipal routes are unclear, and coordination with municipalities varies. The implications of this are an impact to tourism by creating frustration for travelers and motorists, decreased safety through driver confusion and indecision as a result of inconsistent information, and wasted time and resources addressing complaints or making one-off decisions. Alberta Transportation is engaging municipalities across Alberta to seek municipal input on these issues. Once Alberta Transportation has completed these engagements, they will be recommending a revised policy for provincial highway connectors and clarifying the process of coordination with municipalities. They will also add guidance to the Alberta Highway Guide and Information Sign Manual. Attached for council's information are 2 drawings showing photos of the existing signage along Highway 542 and Highway 873 within the city's boundaries. There are inconsistencies in the way the highways are signed and numbered in the cities. As shown on the drawing, some locations have quite a few signs, which makes the intersection congested when you have both street name signs and highway numbers. As mentioned above, this creates driver confusion. In the near future, staff would like to look at creating a standard street sign design to be used on all arterial roads within the city, which can be clearly seen by all motorists. Therefore, staff is recommending that highway numbering not be used within the municipality and that only street names be displayed.
Okay, go ahead. Councilor Goodenough?
I love this idea. My concern is, how does this correlate with Google Maps or the map programs, electronic maps?
So that's actually part of the concern and why Alberta Transportation is looking at this, because there is so much inconsistent data out there. So they're hoping to come up with consistency so that our maps are updated the same way that their maps are updated, and hopefully through Google. But unfortunately, that's not something that us as a municipality or even Alberta Transportation controls. You can send in requests to the different maps and ask them to make changes, but it's time consuming and not always done, so.
So you want to eliminate the Alberta Transportation, like the 542 signs, once we get into the city of Brooks then? Yeah,
That's correct.
yeah. And right now, for those signs, we cover the cost of those signs? Right, yeah.
Yes, I believe, and Don can confirm, but I believe the ones that are there are existing from before the city took over the roadways.
Oh, okay. So, what's everybody's thoughts on that? Go ahead, yeah.
I like this idea too, but just to make sure we have all bases covered, are there any exceptions that would be helpful to motorists? Like, to direct to the number 1, like
Yeah,
any
yeah.
ones that are major, right? That like if you were on Google Maps per se, right? That one will always be there, and that one will always be one pretty clear, right? Trying to get to the highway there, the main highway. Are there any exceptions to the ones that we should eliminate, or maybe keep a couple?
I think Don and I in discussions felt that the signs that point to the number 1 were definitely beneficial, and I think in even some places they don't exist, so it might be beneficial to have them. But we just felt that the highway numbering of specifically of the 873 and the 572 created confusion, and especially because it's not even clear based on our signage where they actually are.
Agreed. But I would say, to include the signage to the number 1 would be, because there are some places where it would be helpful, especially when during the summer we have lots of tourists. you know, driving around the region. Send them the wrong way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know where you, yeah, like on Castles Road and Second Street, I mean, if somebody's coming in on one way, there's a sign that says Trans-Canada North or something like that, or Trans-Canada, well, there's Trans-Canada both ways, but that's what you're saying, right?
Yeah.
Do we do that now, like with our signs? I can't, yeah, I mean, yeah.
If you look at
get
the-
habituated to the signs after you drive for a
Yeah,
while,
if you
but-
look at the attachments, you can see that, for instance, if you're driving westbound on Castles Road, we don't mention anything about the turnoff for Highway 1. But in other situations, we do. I believe that's on Sutherland at Castles. We do show that if you head eastbound, that the number 1 is there. So we felt that those definitely are beneficial, but all the others create so much congestion. And as I mentioned, some aren't signed and some are showing incorrect numbers and not showing numbers. So we felt that it made most sense to keep it simple.
Are we fine with that? Okay, are we good with, okay? Yeah, I know, yeah, he's not here. Yeah, what did Bill, Bill, okay. Oh, go ahead, Don, go ahead, yeah.
Yeah, if I could just add that if you're coming on Highway 1 and going east or west, that sign that's on the highway there says Township Road 190 and Castles Road. So there is no sign that says 542 at all off of the Trans-Canada Highway. And coming from the other direction going east, it says 2nd Street West and Highway 873 North. So when you get up to 2nd Street West, you go south into 2nd Street West and north into 873. So the highway itself doesn't advertise the highway signs.
Yeah. Okay, are we fine with the recommendation then? Okay, we're good. Anything else there? Anything, and then we'll just after. Yeah, I don't know, would Sandra be, no, Sandra's not on there, okay. Can I adjourn this meeting then? Okay, I'll adjourn the meeting at 6:32.